Hey friends, today we're going to talk about playing through chord changes. Let's go. All right, so one of the most challenging things is to actually outline the chords, play through the chord changes. So we're going to take some simple steps and I'm going to show you some simple concepts that you can do to get started on this journey. But before we do that, I would invite you to check out my Patreon page. This is going to be the first of a 5 series. I'm going to go over the 5 cage boxes, learning the different arpeggios of the 1, 4, and 5 chord, and also some of the pentatonic scales and trying to connect them. This is the only one I'm actually going to put on YouTube, though. The rest of them are going to be exclusive to my Patreon. So if you want to get the rest of that, you might want to jump over there. This is going to be geared towards my Tier 2, but I'm going to assume and expect that some of my Tier 3 and Tier 4 people are also going to benefit from this too. So go ahead and check that out, and I certainly appreciate your support. Helps keep the channel going. Also, if you'd like this video, please like it and subscribe and all that good stuff. But for now, let's get going. All right, so you know, playing through chord changes, a lot of times as guitar players, I know I'm guilty of this. What we like to do is think of playing rhythm guitar and playing lead guitar or solo guitar, or melodies, however you want to describe it, as 2 separate things. Usually when we go for our lead playing, we just kind of think of what key we're in and we just kind of play that major or minor scale or whatever mode that might apply to that particular situation. However, I think it's one step better to actually outline the chords a bit. In other words, find the good notes to land on or to start from, especially when the chord changes. So in this case, I'm going to look at the key of D, and I'm just going to look at the 1, 4, and 5 chord in the key of D. Just, you know, basic changes that you'll see in a million songs, blues songs, pop songs, all kinds of different styles. And, you know, this is kind of geared towards the beginner or intermediate level guitar player. But this is why I think the CAGED system is so brilliant, because it gives you kind of a schematic, if you will, of being able to play through some of these chord changes rather than just go, oh, I'm in this key, let's just let it rip in that key. Now, don't get me wrong, I do that sometimes and it's really fun. But if you want to be a more evolved melodic player, you want to make sure that you're addressing the harmony or the chords that are going on behind you. So we're going to take a look at pattern number 1. We're in the key of D. And if you're looking at pattern 1 in the CAGED system, that's the C shape. So our 1 chord is going to be D major, and we're just going to play that in the form of a C. In other words, we're just taking an open C chord and we're barring it, turning it into a movable shape, and moving it up a whole step to the key of D. Okay, so there's our 1 chord, and that would be a pattern 1. Now in the key of D, our 4 chord would be G major. And my goal here is to try to stay right in this position. You know, a lot of times we tend to move shapes around and we kind of get glued to a shape. I want to kind of get out of that. I want to be able to see these chords all over the guitar. So we're just going to take 1 box at a time, okay? This one's starting with the 1 chord as the C shape. The 4 chord, which is G major, will be a pattern 4, which is based off the E shape chord. And then the 5 chord, which is A major, will be based off the G shape chord. So that would be a pattern 3. So one more time, my 1 chord is a pattern 1. My 4 chord is a pattern 4. And my 5 chord is a pattern 3. Now, this would be true to any key that I'm in. If I move to a different key, let's say I move up to the key of F, it's the same chords. Same shapes, I should say. Different chords, but it's the same shape. So that's some of the physical attributes that we can take advantage of on the guitar, is that kind of shape, copy and pasting shapes around. So once we learn it in pattern 1 in the key of D, we can move it around to any key that we want. Okay, so the first order of business is to just realize the chords, right? So we've got pattern 1 for our 1 chord, pattern 4 for our 4 chord, and pattern 3 for our 5 chord. Now the next thing that you want to think about is the arpeggios. And arpeggios is always a dangerous word to say to guitar players because it always kind of conjures up these insane shredder type players like Yngwie Malmsteen or Jason Becker, because they're like the master of these insane arpeggios. So I'm going to kind of think of it more as chord tones, because I don't want you to just arpeggiate through everything, maybe a little bit as an exercise, but as you evolve this, basically what you want to do is just look at those as target notes or chord tones, okay? But, you know, to start off with, we're going to go through some of the arpeggios. So the pattern 1, or the C shape major arpeggio here, and we're just doing triads for now. We're going to keep it simple. We got the root, the major third, the fifth. We have another root here, another major third, and another fifth. And the low E string, which always mirrors the high E string. We also have the fifth and the major third here. So the full arpeggio. And that goes right around that chord shape. Let's look at our 4-chord arpeggio. Here's our chord. I always play the chord first because it reveals most of the shape, and you might just have to add a note here and there. So we're going to play the root here. We're going to add a major third here. Now that's not part of the chord, but it is definitely a part of the arpeggio. Then we have the fifth. You can roll your finger down. There's another root tone. There's another major third, another fifth, and another root tone. All right, and then our 5 chord, which is the G shape. This would be an A major chord. Here's that arpeggio. We got root, third, fifth, root, third, fifth, and another root there. So there's our shapes that we're going to use, and I have a little backing track. And what the exercise is we want to change arpeggios as the chord changes. So what I did was I recorded a little backing track that has 2 measures on the D chord, or the 1 chord. It has 2 measures on the G, or the 4 chord. Then it has 2 measures on the 5 chord. And then 1 measure back on the D, and then 1 more measure of the 5 chord, just to kind of cycle through that phrase. And then we're back, okay? Now what I want you to do is I want you to arpeggiate in just basically a steady stream of eighth notes as best you can. And what you want to do is you want to change those arpeggios for each chord. And when you first start this, what I notice is a lot of people, when they first start doing this, they become kind of a little bit reliant on the root tones. That's okay at first. So just for now, let's just start all of the arpeggios from the root tones, and then I'll show you some exercises where you can kind of get away from that. But let's just check that out real quick. First, I'm going to just play the chords. 2, 3, 4. Now the 4. Now the 5 chord. Sometimes I play the top, sometimes I play the bottom. And then we got 1 measure on the D, and then back to the 5 chord. Now I'm just going to play eighth notes. Okay, so basically what I'm doing is I'm just, when that chord comes, I'm playing the root tone and playing up and down the arpeggio till the end of that 2 measures, and then I'm going to the next chord. That's a good place to start, but like I said, sometimes you can get a little attached to those root tones. So what you want to do is you want to start being able to see these arpeggios from any note. So there's this little exercise that we can do, which basically kind of makes you find some of these other tones just to get away from that root tone. And what it is basically is you can start, let's say, on the 1 chord, and play just a steady stream of eighth notes, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Then what you want to do is staying in the direction that you're moving, whether it be ascending or descending. You want to find the nearest chord tone of the next chord. So my next chord is G, and it's that pattern 4, so I'm just going to slide up from the third of the D up to the G and start that 2-measure phrase. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay, so the last note of that G chord would be a G note. The next chord is A, so I'm just going to go to A here and come down that A major. 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then try to find the next one of the next chord. This connects your arpeggios together. You know, you want to keep it going so that it changes all the time. It's always changing what note you're going to target. This is a little bit harder than you think it is, but it's a really good exercise, and it gets you away from kind of being attached to that root tone. So the goal here is to find the clearest or the nearest chord tone of the next chord and start from that tone when that new chord arrives. Remember, it's 2 measures on each chord. Let's give that a try. Okay, so that one's a little tougher. Now the next stage of that is once you've kind of done that and you can kind of gauge how comfortable you are with it. Maybe you need to do it a little bit longer than I did there. That's just to kind of give you a demonstration of it. I've practiced this a bit in my life and still do it to this day because I think it's just a really great exercise. And of course you can parlay this into more complex chord changes. So the next thing to do is to kind of change your phrasing now. We were just kind of doing steady eighth notes, and that's really good to do just to kind of create some kind of disciplined way of going through these chord changes, but it's not very musical. So the next step to do, I think, would just be create some phrases, right? Loosen up on that strict eighth note and play some quarter notes and some eighth notes and mix them together. And if you're even feeling it, maybe some triplets or some 16th notes, whatever you can attain there at that particular tempo. Let me just kind of demonstrate that, and this will hopefully sound a little bit more musical than just that steady stream of eighth notes. All right, let's do it. All right, cool. So that definitely sounds a lot more musical, a little hipper, and it's kind of a little bit more fun to do it that way too. Another thing that you could potentially do is mix up the notes. Now, even though I changed my phrasing there, I was still kind of ascending and descending the arpeggios. Now you can actually randomize the notes a little bit So it just doesn't sound like you're just going up and down arpeggios, right? So you can randomize your phrasing a little bit, randomize the notes, and now you're going to get some maybe a little bit more interesting sounds. Let's try that once. Okay, so now it's actually getting a lot hipper, and I'm still only just playing the triad arpeggio. Now here's the thing, of course, there is a major scale pattern here. Right, there's a D major scale pattern there. I'm kind of building from the ground up. I'm starting with the chord and then the arpeggios. Now the next thing I might do is do some pentatonic scales, and I would do the same exercise. First thing you want to do is find those pentatonic scales. So for D major, pattern 1. So you might want to just review them before you actually get going on the track. Here's my G is pattern number 4 of a major pentatonic. And then my A chord here is a pattern number 3. And then back to D again. And then back into the A again, right? Let's try that one time. Awesome. All right, so you know, I kind of just jumped right into doing some phrases and some random notes. But if you have to just kind of do steady stream of eighth notes starting from the root with your pentatonic scales, you can do that too, and then eventually build that up. Now, one thing I also like to do, you know, sometimes major pentatonic scales can sound a little square, for lack of a better term. So what I like to do is add the minor third as kind of a embellishment note or a passing note in my major pentatonic. So for the D, right here you have the root, here's the major second, here's the minor third, and that leads you right into the major third. So I just kind of like that as a little pickup note or as a little embellishment, and it kind of smooths out that kind of squareness of that major pentatonic. Same thing with my G. So here's the G major. So I might add and then for the A major pentatonic pattern 3 here. That minor third is here, and the minor third is also here. I usually refer to these as major blues scales, right? Because they kind of like the minor blues adds a flat 5, the major blues kind of adds that flat 3, and it just kind of makes it one step hipper. Let's see what those sound like over these chord changes. So even though this is kind of a simple exercise, it really leads you down the path of being able to see those chords. And as we do this with each position on the guitar, then you're going to be able to flow all over the neck. As long as you know what chord is coming, you can address that chord with a chord tone. And your playing is a lot more melodic. I kind of think of when you play in a major key, for example, or a minor key for that matter, if you just kind of play around with just that major scale, it can sound a little noodly to me. So I like to kind of really hear the chord changes. It's almost like you should be able to hear the chord changes even if the chords weren't being played behind you. So of course you've got to recognize how long each chord is being played for. In this case I made it pretty simple. It's kind of 2 measures on each chord. If you were applying this to a different song, you would definitely need to know when those chords are changing. So once you kind of go through these exercises, then you can loosen up, and hopefully those kind of shapes will be there in the background, right? And I'm just doing this with a 1-4-5, but you know, the 1-4-5 chords in any, you know, any style of music, blues, pop, Americana, it's just all over the place. So it's a really good one to start off with, and we're going to continue this with each individual box, and then we're going to go back and do it with the minor ones too, and kind of stair step it from there. All right, so that's a little introduction on how to start playing through the chord changes rather than just going, oh, I'm in this key, I'm going to let it rip. Now you can do that, and that sounds cool too. I think a blend of the two is kind of the best way to go, because this is a little bit more melodic sounding, and then maybe just kind of letting it rip is fun and exciting also, so you kind of got the best of both worlds there. All right, cool. Remember, like, share, and subscribe. Also check out my Patreon page, and there's going to be more on this particular series and more videos to come. I'll see you soon. Cheers.